Okay, this is a special meeting of the Affordable Housing Committee on August 20th, Thursday at 7 o'clock. On the call, at least so far, Steve Graffall, Carrie McEvoy, Gretchen Gerthner, Helene Daly, Sheila Davis, Herb Lightcooler, and Alexis Harrison. Did I miss anyone?
I don't know if you got me, Nancy Lyons?
Oh, Nancy's on.
Oh, Nancy's
okay,
here.
Great.
And we have a quorum, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to note that we are missing two members who could not make it tonight, Cindy and Joanne. And just to note that only members of the committee are allowed to speak tonight. We've got a pretty full agenda, and I will correct what I just said. If Carrie, you need Herb or Alexis to add anything in your presentation on the accessory dwelling units.
Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
So first, I'd like to have a motion to approve and accept the minutes from the July 15th meeting.
So moved. This is Carrie. I second it, Nancy.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, raise your hand. Say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. The minutes are accepted. Good.
Okay.
So tonight we have a couple of big topics and a few other additional items. But the big topics are what we had discussed last month and actually for a few months, the proposed amendments to the town's accessory dwelling unit regulations and discussions about how to get the Affordable Housing Trust Fund up and running to accept applications. With that, I'd like to turn over the microphone, the meeting, to Carrie and ask Carrie to present about the accessory dwelling units.
Okay, thank you, Steve. First of all, I wanted to thank Herb and Alexis for tuning in. Both represent organizations that have been working with us on preparing this material for really the last several weeks. And even though we kind of have a different approach or emphasis, we're all aiming towards the same thing, which is a diversity of housing that is friendly to seniors, that is ecologically supportive of our community, and doesn't cause too much ruckus, but can work in conjunction with what we have already. So with that, last meeting, I presented to the AHC a preliminary draft of the zoning regulations, proposed zoning regulations, and I asked for additional comments. I didn't get any. Cindy and I went to meet with Emmeline Harrigan and Jim Wendt and to get their thoughts on it. We went over that on July 23rd. I then revised what we had slightly based on their comments and sent it back to them again. Didn't hear anything further. So what you have now is where things stand in terms of what I gave them, their response, and that's in the proposed zoning amendment. The existing language of the zoning text is straightforward. The struck out text crossed out, that's what we're proposing to go out, and the underlined text is what's proposing to be added. And there's a statement of need that talks about, why this is important. And it's funny, as I've been thinking about it all afternoon, to me it's all of a sudden the acceleration of so many changes in the world, in society, in the community, in what people need and what people want. Our world has really been turned upside down in a very few months. And accessory dwelling units are one type of housing that can help with this tremendously, both for people who decide to go ahead and build it and for people who might eventually live in it. It's generally naturally occurring affordable housing. Much of it can be senior friendly because it's smaller. It's nice if it's near your family and you're a senior because somebody's kind of looking over you, although you're not dwelling in the same unit, but you're next door or in a connected unit. And all of these considerations have really landed on our doorstep, and here we are. And the nice thing about zoning regulations, if there is such a thing as a nice thing about zoning regulations, is they're not set in stone. They are intended to be amended from time to time to react to what needs are in the community and what's going on, and that's where we are. So in your packet, I provided a statement of need, which it goes through a lot of this stuff, the demographics, and also talks about the exact changes that we were proposing. And I can go over those now with you. But let me stop here for a minute and just ask, are there any questions so far?
Yes.
Okay.
What? Steve Sassini. Exactly what are you asking the members of the Affordable Housing Committee to do?
Okay. What I would like the members of the Affordable Housing Committee to do is to support this application, which is going to be made, join in the application, which is going to be made to the Town Plan and Zoning Commission, because they're the ones who can officially approve or modify what we've presented and then approve this to make it part of the zoning regulations. That process itself is several weeks and maybe even a couple of months in length, because when we submit it to them, they then have to send it to the MetroCog, which is the Greater Bridgeport Regional Planning, for their review. They have an opportunity to comment on it. I wouldn't anticipate any particular problem with it. These are very common regulations in most communities, and more people are looking at them now. Then it comes back, then it would have to be scheduled for a public hearing in front of the commission, and all of that itself could take a couple of months because of the time requirements, the legal notices, the other things the commission is dealing with. So what I'm looking for tonight is a vote of, yes, let's go ahead, and then we can put it into motion. Okay?
So, Carrie, this is Steve again. Two questions.
Yes.
In addition to the Fairfield Senior Advocates, are there any other groups that are joining in?
In the actual application, my intention is for it to be the Affordable Housing Committee and Fairfield Senior Advocates, but with the support of Fair Plan and Fairfield Senior Advocates, which again I'm a member of, so it's it's like, who am I tonight? But but I don't know that they're actually signing the application. In terms of Fairfield Senior Advocates, we are not actually a 501c3. We're a group of people who do this, but we're not an organized community organization with, Urbax is our president and coordinator, but we don't have 501c3 standing.
Yeah. Well, Carrie, let me ask Mark. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mark, the last time we did this, we tried to make changes to the accessory dwelling unit regulations. The Affordable Housing Committee submitted the change with a memo to TP&Z. So, Carrie, Mark, is that the way that the Affordable Housing Committee would be the front person, or is it a joint memo?
Yeah.
That is in fact what was done previously, and I was just going to ask that clarifying question. It sounded to me like you really what we're proposing is the Affordable Housing Committee to make the application with the support of the Fairfield Senior Advocates who did the lion's work on this, as well as Fair Plan.
Yeah, and FSA. Yeah,
good.
Exactly.
So really to authorize, I guess the motion would be to authorize the middle of a text amendment to planning and zoning to amend the regulation.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? This is Sheila. I'm sorry. I am I'm going to defer because I'm not a zoning expert by any means, and I know you all are very in tune, and it looks good to me. But there are quite a few changes. The highlighted text is the change, and we got that yesterday. Is that right?
Well, you got a first draft of it at the last meeting, and then the
Yes.
revisions were posted to the website yesterday.
Okay. And I haven't taken a look at them yet, but my apologies for that. But I, again, defer and trust that, having spoken with the planning and zoning experts, it's probably in really great shape, and I thank you.
Well, this is
Okay.
also this would be a proposed amendment, and the Planning and Zoning Commission obviously would have the final say as to whether or not to accept it in its entirety, or parts of it, or make modifications to what is being proposed. But maybe it would make sense for Carrie to go over the change from the last go round.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and just to understand, I'm sorry, Sheila, again, just to understand, are you on? You're not on an agenda with the P&Z at the moment, are you? So
no,
we don't have
to actually
vote.
AHD
we don't
have to actually submit an application. 10 copies of an application and $50, which they'll probably waive. It's similar to the one that was done in 2009, which is attached to the packet. Steve's cover letter is attached to the packet, and Jim Wendt's comments, and it's very similar to that. The procedure would be.
Now I understand what that is. Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So shall we go over this? Okay.
Yes, please.
So, well, it's currently defined in Section 6. Those regulations have been in place for quite a while, and our first take on it was to propose very incremental and minor changes, and they sort of got a little bit bigger as we went along, but they're still fairly incremental. We defined, or at 6.2.1, we defined the term accessory apartment to clarify that an accessory apartment, which is sometimes called an accessory dwelling unit or an ADU, and I kind of switch between those terms, must contain a full kitchen and a bathroom. And in many cases, I know Steve had this question earlier, let's say your widowed mother-in-law comes to live with you, and if you only want to say, okay, Mom, you're going to have these 2 rooms, and one will be a bedroom and one will be a sitting room, and we'll put a coffee counter with a sink and a small fridge and maybe a microwave, if you want to heat something up before we have dinner together or whatever. That's not an accessory apartment. That's just a room with a sink and a small fridge. Many of those exist throughout town. And somebody does not need to go through the accessory application approval for that. That's not a separate apartment. That's sort of part of your house with a little dedicated sitting area. And for some people, that's fine, and that's all they need. And there are probably a few of these, or more than a few of these around town that we don't even know about, but they're not considered an accessory apartment. What makes an accessory apartment in terms of planning and zoning is a stove, a freestanding stove, with an oven and burners, all of that. So that's one thing. 6.3.2, we suggested slight revisions to the maximum floor area of the ADU to accommodate more needed flexibility, because we discussed last time, and Mark mentioned this, that having a minimum size was not necessary, or I think you said legal, Mark, as I remember. So we did not talk about size in particular. So what we left it was I took out the not less than 450 square feet, which I had in last time. And Jim and Emmeline wanted not including floor area for utilities and rough storage removed, so I removed that. So basically, it would now read, the accessory apartment shall not contain not more than 40% or 1,000 square feet of floor area of the originally existing residence, whichever is less, full stop. Okay, any questions?
Nope.
Okay, the main thing, and this is the big change that we took out, was 6.3.3. The originally existing residence shall have been in existence for a minimum of 5 years and not have undergone exterior alterations for a minimum of 5 years, except as such alterations, and it goes on from there. They wanted all that out, except they did not want, when I say they, I mean Jim and Emmeline, they did not want, they wanted me to leave in the original house shall have been in existence for 5 years. So that's still in there. Okay, where are we now? 6.33. All right, this should all be in the packet that you could have printed off from the web. And then 6.3.4, language was proposed for removal that says you have to have you cannot have a door on the front facade, and right now we have proposed access to the accessory department may be on the front facade of the residence, provided is separated from the front door by at least 10 feet. Who's barking? And is of additional different appearance than the primary entrance. The fire escape and outside stairway, if any, shall be closed. Now that fire escape and outside stairway has been in the regulations for years. I don't know exactly when that was put in. It may have been in 2009. I think there were some comments in that time that we don't want it to look like a duplex with stairs coming down from the second floor. I've left that in for now because it's in there to start with. I know Steve had a question on that earlier. 6.3.5 remains the same. When I proposed this to you last time in 6.3.6, we had that the accessory apartment that it couldn't be rented for a period of less than 180 days. And Jim said, no, we can't do that because in our current regs we allow a 30-day rental, 30 consecutive days. So we have to have that in. So there's no way of saying that you can't rent it for 30 consecutive days, and you could even rent it as an Airbnb rental, I imagine. We didn't really get into that, but that went back to the 30 consecutive days from the 180. And then this is where it starts getting very interesting, particularly in relationship to the Housing Trust Fund, 6.3.10, and down through to the end of 6.3.10. All of that was adapted from the Town of Ridgefield regulations, as noted in the footnote on the second page. There was some discussion with Jim, but we really didn't clarify it. There was something about how are we going to use this in conjunction with the housing trust funds, and supposedly he and Mark had been talking, and we decided to leave this in just for the moment, knowing it's probably going to change depending on what Jim and Mark have, and I guess us, have been talking about use of housing trust funds for this. So it's in here for now. And I think it probably needs some work because, as I said, I just sort of copied and pasted it from Ridgefield to get something in there, to get it started. And we may need to adapt it further. And then,
excuse me, Carrie.
Yeah,
excuse
yeah.
me, this is Steve. I don't understand how that connects to the trust fund and why we would need to change any language because of the trust fund.
Well, I don't know that we know the answers to that right now. That's when I met with Jim and Emmeline, that's what they said, or that's what Jim said. He said he's been talking to Mark about something having to do with housing trust funds monies, nothing ready for public consumption yet, and that there may be some ways of tying it in with funding, and maybe some of that language has to be in here. I really don't know. So it's just here for now.
That's a little different.
Maybe.
What's the are we saying in this section of the regs that in order for an accessory dwelling unit to be legal, it has to have a deed restriction?
No, only the ones that are affordable, that are considered affordable housing.
Okay.
Like 6.3, yeah, it says that right in 6.3.10.
I got you.
Okay.
All right.
So it's a 10-year deed restriction. You can get up to 3 units in an affordable, you can get up to 3 occupants in an affordable unit. And I would say, again, this is Steve, that if we wanted to fund this kind of stuff, it would just be one of the eligible items under, like Sheila's big list. This would be one of the eligible items. I don't see why we'd have to change any of this language at all.
Okay.
That's just my feeling.
Correct. Yeah, this is Sheila. It should all be consistent, whether it's inclusionary or 830G or ADU or, yeah, I agree with Carrie. It should be in here, and it should just state what if it is affordable, what regs it needs to, regulations it needs to meet, so that it's all consistent.
Yeah.
Okay, Carrie?
Yeah.
Where's the three people, Steve? What do you?
The three people was in the current regulations, I think.
Yeah,
three
what did
people. Oh, here, under 636. It exists under 636.
Yeah, which is like page 3. It just says that no more than 2 unless it's affordable. Then you can have up to 3 people.
Hey.
But I think the health code is going to have a say in that.
That language is a bit problematic.
Kind of strange, yeah.
You don't typically have occupancy limits in zoning regulations. It's a housing code issue. I would say that, or when you try to limit, I mean, it's not you, Carrie, or
no,
Fairfield.
No, it's the current regs. It's
language. So, I mean, we'll have to talk about that later. I mean, I've mentioned this before, that this could be an issue in terms of fair housing compliance, because typically you don't use zoning regulations to limit occupancy. But
you could specify bedrooms. You could say something like, 1 bedroom or 2 bedrooms.
Right. I think the issue, and it's not an issue unless somebody brings a action against it. So,
but it should be flexible.
Let it go.
According to the health department regulations for size of.
Yeah, sorry to get you sidetracked there, Carrie. Go ahead.
Yep.
Okay. So, all right, we'll leave that in. And then 6.3.11. I had something slightly different last time when I brought it to the Affordable Housing Committee, and I said, existing structures or garages could be constructed or converted into an accessory apartment. And Jim felt that based on what we had heard in the Plan of Conservation and Development workshops, that the community was ready to accept freestanding accessory structures could be constructed or converted into an accessory apartment under the following conditions. And again, in order just to get this discussion started, I basically put those 4 conditions in. And the 2 acres, it could work on 1 acre certainly, but I started with 2. There are generally no sewers up in the 2 acre zone. There are a few. Maximum size is the 1,000 square feet. Conform to all requirements of Fairfield Health Department and Building Department. And what this means, actually, is that if somebody is willing to spend the money to build a small house, which is what we're talking about, they could actually do that in a 2 acre zone. They might treat it as a guest house. They might treat it as a rental unit, whatever it is. That would become legal. Do I think there would be a lot of these constructed? No, I do not, and for several reasons. The first one is expense. I mean, right now we are seeing a huge increase in the price of lumber, which is affecting everything. Lumber has gone up since April. I don't know, it was some really, really big number, and this is going to affect construction. And this is a very expensive area in which to construct almost anything. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of these, but this is a start into something that I think is coming. I don't know how many of you have been following Desegregate Connecticut, but one of the things they are stressing is accessory apartments and liberalizing zoning across the board. This is a small start in that direction. We might see 2 or 3 of these constructed over a couple of years, I don't think we'd see more than that right now. And I don't think any of the Housing Trust Fund monies would need to be used for this either.
Well, let's keep that separate. But what was the planning and zoning staff? What was their feedback with regard to the lot size minimum?
They thought start with 2 acres. If the commission wanted to change it, they would have that ability.
Okay.
Yeah. Carrie, that's the only thing, Mr. Sheila. The only thing that bothers me is exactly that reason. With the mention of sewers versus sump pumps, I guess, right?
Not sump pumps. Sewers versus septic system.
Yeah.
Freestanding septic system.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You can tell I'm not a plumber, so yeah. And so that might be considered restrictive for somebody who might want to have an accessory apartment that is on the town sewer system.
Yeah.
So from a fair housing standpoint, the ability to do that.
No, they can.
Yeah.
They just have to get approval from the health department and the building department, whether it's septic or sewer. I mean, either they're going to connect to the sewer line if there is one, and there is a sewer line running up towards Burst School, I guess. Is that what's the school in the northern part of town? I can't think of its name. But there's a sewer line running up. Yeah, there was a sewer line running up towards there.
Oh,
and there are some
I guess what I'm referring to is the acreage. The minimum acreage at 2. So
well, if somebody
just something to think about.
If somebody wanted to do, yes, and the commission can think about it. And let's say they approve it at 2 acres, and let's say somebody wanted to do this on a 1 acre or 1.5 acre zone, a 1 acre lot, they could go to the zoning board of appeals for a variance.
Or they could propose.
Or they could propose a text amendment. Yeah.
Right.
True. Yep. Okay.
And these could be useful for people who want to have their parents living, in what would look like a guest cottage out back, or people who want to have, an older child living there. I mean, it's certainly not an uncommon concept that it would be desired. I just don't think we're going to have a lot of them.
Yeah, I agree for all the reasons you mentioned. You changed the name. Yeah. It's no longer detached. It's freestanding.
Well, that implies detached.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I just picked that up.
Yeah.
Any reason? Besides the obvious?
Not that I can remember at the moment.
Okay.
Did the word that was used. I'm sure these are going to, get further looked at and words will be changed. All right, 6.4 application procedure. That's all pretty much the same as it is in the current residence, and the only real change is 6.6 sale of residence, where it just says any such use by a new owner will be subject to the provisions of 6.0.
Right. So, Carrie.
Yeah.
Steve.
I recognize your voice.
Yeah, so the thing for us to do now is we would take a vote, assuming that the vote is approved. We would draft a memo. We would send the regs over to TP&Z. They would send it to MetroCog. I'm not sure why. And then
it's in the rules.
It wouldn't get to TP&Z officially for a couple of months, right?
That's true, and that's what Jim and Emmeline told me.
Yeah.
It would probably be late October, November before it was an actual hearing date.
Can I ask just a question here? On 6.3.11, Carrie?
Yeah.
I know the strategy, the strategy that's behind it, but what is the rationale behind 2 acres versus 1 versus some other number?
I don't have a good answer to that question at this point. We can. I'm sure I can come up with one, but just that it seemed to be, in a way, the easiest to start with 2 acres, you've got room to move around. 1 acre on some properties is already very tight. And with 2 acres, you've got, decent setbacks and decent, enough coverage to play with. 1 acre, with a lot of people have already in terms of driveways and pools, it's very tight.
Do we know how much of town is zoned 2 acre?
It's a pretty good chunk of it.
Yeah,
it's a pretty good chunk of it, because basically if you look at the sewer map, it's sort of north of where the sewers stop, and the sewers are all down here in the southeastern part of town. I think, Steve asked me earlier how many of these I thought would be built, and I think a lot of it, I think it's a tremendous opportunity to use the housing trust funds to get these started, or to legalize ones we have and help with the construction costs. Or I don't think it's so much construction as it is modification at this point. I don't think we're going to see a lot of somebody's going to do a big addition and put it on, although there might. But I think just to legalize what we've got and be able to deed restrict it, I think there needs to be some financial incentive, whether it's through a grant from the Housing Trust Fund or tax relief or however. And I think that's something that we've got to work out.
So let me just follow up on Mark's question. And I want to get this rolling, and so I don't want to get stuck on the 2 acres. But I've got a friend who's got 0.8 of an acre, and he's got a house on sewer, and he's got a separate garage. And that garage could easily be upstairs, easily be made into a unit. And as I said,
it's a freestanding garage.
Yeah. And he's not the only owner in town.
No,
but
he's probably not the only one. Yeah.
We can weigh in on that when we have the discussion at TP&Z.
Or
we're not going to get a perfect set of regulations to submit to TP&Z.
But affordable housing would also have, we are making suggestions to TP&Z, and if we could put in 1 acre or 1 acre plus right now, we're not talking about zone district of the property. We're talking about size of the property. Like if we could say 1.5 acres or whatever.
I only asked the question simply because I think that's a rational question to be asked, and we should have an answer for it. That's all.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
I disagree.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Go ahead, Sheila.
To Steve's point, we shouldn't assume that there aren't people who have properties that could, accommodate this. I actually, it has been like a catching point for me. The other thing is to your point, or to your rationale, Carrie, people who live in acre properties that have more than 2 acres are probably going to have less of an interest of having their properties deed restricted and or income eligible, whether it's the tenant or themselves. So from that standpoint, it may not be a great sell, although I do believe it's a good start, and I do believe that free accessory structures should be available. So I, like Steve, I would hate to hold it up for that. But please note that, it will come up, and, the likelihood of somebody wanting their property deed restricted even for 10 years.
No, but we're not talking about deed restricted. There's going to be 2 types of accessory apartments, perhaps constructed. One will have deed restrictions, and but there are many other people who want to do it without deed restrictions, so that they can rent it to their kid or their mom, or not rent it at all, but just have somebody living there from the family. So the deed restriction
and they wouldn't get
is a whole separate thing. So
and that wouldn't include housing trust funds.
No, it wouldn't include housing trust fund money.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm looking at. Go ahead.
I wanted to say there is no reason we couldn't make that change right now. Say, yes, we like this, but instead of 2 acres, put existing lot of 1.5 or 1.3 or whatever feels comfortable to you, because I'm not talking about a zoning district. I'm talking about a size of lot.
Yeah, and I don't know how many, what's the common acreage either, so I don't know where to draw that line. I think I would defer to you.
Okay.
And the committee on that. But number D, or letter D under that reg, that could be moved into that other section we just talked about, where we referred to the health department making the decision on the number of people. If that's good wording that could be put into what was that, 6.3.6. Just FYI.
6.3.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Yeah, that could be
6.3.11D, and just move it on, because that should be like a universal thing. Mark, let me ask you about the 2 acres. Would you recommend leaving it at 2, or should we drop it to 1 or drop it to half acre?
I think for purposes of moving this forward, assuming that the majority of the committee agrees, I think we should leave it as is unless people feel strongly with something else. I know a lot of work has been done already, and my purpose of raising the question was simply to make sure that we have an answer when that question is inevitably raised at the commission. The commission,
yeah.
I mean, we can change our posture even when we get to the commission. We can indicate that we had considered something less, and that's certainly at the discretion of the commission. So the commission really has ultimate discretion here, and obviously are to impose whatever condition they see fit. So I would leave, rather than belabor the point, I would leave it as is for the time being, just to get the conversation started. I would want to have some information, at least the rationale that we could explain. This is why we thought, as opposed to just saying, well, we did this just as an opening bid, and thought that this would be the easiest to accomplish, and something like that. I think we have to have some basis for the 2 acres.
Yeah, no, I can certainly develop a rationale.
I think Carrie started to articulate, which made sense to me. So I just want to make sure we have.
Okay.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman, I want to first acknowledge that Joanne is in listening mode, is in attendance. So Gretchen could make sure that the minutes reflect the fact that Joanne Zonka is on. Romana Zonka is on the call, and then she's not able to participate freely like Helene. But the other thing I would suggest, if you want, in terms of a resolution, you could. I would propose that you authorize myself to file on behalf of the Affordable Housing Committee an application with the Planning and Zoning Commission to amend Section 6.0 of the Fairfield Zoning Regulations regarding accessory dwelling units as presented by the Fairfield Senior Advocate.
I like that motion.
As presented by the Affordable Housing Committee and Fairfield Senior Advocates with the support of Fair Plan. And can we say that? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Gretchen, did you get that?
I got some, but I'd like to have it emailed to me, so I'll get in touch with her.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
I'll email.
Okay. GOETHNER@AOL.com.
Yeah, can I do that tomorrow, Gretchen?
Oh yes.
Okay. And hoping that the members, the committee members, heard the motion as articulated by Mark. I would like to move the motion. Have somebody.
I second it.
Second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, I'd like to have the vote. So those in favor, say aye.
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 And those opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? So it's unanimous for those members who are able to participate freely.
Okay,
that would be everybody
great.
But Helene and Joanne, and of course Cindy is not in attendance.
I'm getting I'm getting an email from Joanne that I think if I read it correctly, and she'll correct me if I'm wrong, I'm going to record her as being in favor of the motion. Joanne, correct me if I'm misunderstanding what you just emailed me. So we'll fix that. If that's not accurate, I'll make sure that the minutes reflect either way.
Okay. Well, that's great. Thank you, everybody, and thank you to Fair Plan and FSA. And did I miss anybody? I forget.
Thank you all.
Carrie, thanks
well
to you
done.
and Urban, Alexis, and to Jan Rieger. So thanks to everybody.
Is Jan here? Okay.
He is not.
Okay.
All right.
We'll
Thank you,
report.
Carrie. That was a great presentation. That was a great presentation, Carrie.
Thank you. Thanks. This is on no sleep much.
Before,
all right, I'm going to put myself on mute then. Are we done?
Steve?
Okay. Mark, did you have something to say?
Yes. Before we leave the topic, I did get confirmation that Joanne was voting in favor of the motion.
Great.
So if you could reflect that. And I also did want to acknowledge, I know Alexis was on the call, but I assume everyone did receive the letter that Fair Plan submitted today or yesterday in support of the regulations. I think you reflected that, but I did want to acknowledge the letter that you've received, and it'll be part of the minutes.
And also Irv's letter, too. You got a copy of Irv's letter? Yeah.
Yes, both.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Moving on then to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And Sheila, how would you like to proceed with comments about the trust fund and the discussion, advancing it from what we had last month?
Okay. Hi. I haven't had a chance to review your comments that you sent back today, Steve. But thank you. And as I mentioned, I think that at this point, anybody, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if anybody hasn't responded, I was taking that as a indication that they wanted a small committee to subcommittee to go ahead and review what we had thus far. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think based on what I did receive, we are all in similar and like-minded. It is a lot, so that's kind of what and so I think what the subcommittee will do is take what we had and narrow it down. And what I was going to suggest was, depending on what we came up with at that point, maybe there's a tier process. So, if somebody came in and they wanted funds to do something that we didn't see as, in tier 1 priority, that we could consider it for tier 2 if there weren't other applications pending that met the first tier criteria. The thought, and that's it is we don't want to make it too complicated. To your point, Steve, I think there's many things that are funding is available and from other sources, and this is kind of a niche funding source, and we should treat it that way, as long as we remain in line with what the inclusionary and the housing trust fund was intended for. So we will be guided by that as well. The one other thing I thought was, I probably didn't emphasize, as far as pre-development funds, if we want to have, if we expect that a proposal or an applicant comes in and we expect that they are making a contribution to the project, one of the contributions most funders look at are the upfront costs. Are they able to put forth and move ahead, financially to make that investment? It's an investment. It's a buy-in. When you fund a first-time home buyer, a lot of funding requirements are, you need to at least put in $2,000 or a percentage, 5%. And there's a reason for that. It's the buy-in, it's the commitment, So I think that pre-development costs are not necessarily should be used. Housing trust funds should be used for those. I think that a permit cost that maybe the town requires is something we could cover if somebody really wanted to allow for that. But I think the smaller the track of funding, meaning the fewer costs we try to cover, the better off we'll be, the less complicated it is. Believe me, the back end of this, Mark, you've probably not thought about it, but it just occurred to me that, the back end of this is somebody gets to pay the bills. So we know how that works. So we want to kind of streamline it, make sure that the costs are all pretty similar, so that we kind of keep the paperwork simple and the back end too. Yeah.
When we originally did this, we wanted to keep it open-ended because we had absolutely no idea of what we may get or may not get as far as applications.
Yeah. So I think that's.
So in that sense,
I think you need to have some criteria, but I think that's what I'm getting at. I think it doesn't have to be super narrow. But once we make a determination, is it acquisition? Is it rehab? Is it both? That can be a little more complicated, but it is definite. And of course, you have limitations in the amount of money you can provide too per proposal. So, but no, I would say that it's open-ended, maybe, but I don't know if that's a great idea. I think it's good to give people some structure in life, whether it's professional or personal. Yeah. I believe in structure.
So let me say a couple of things. And first, Sheila, I thought this is a good start or a good restart, because we had actually worked on this a little bit 18 months ago or so. And it's time for us to get it done. I like the subcommittee idea very much, and I'd like to, get some volunteers and form one, give them a date that they've got to be done by, and see if we can move this forward. We've got, Mark, as of today, we've got $800,000 in the fund.
Yeah, roughly 792.
Yeah. Yep. and hopefully we'll be using some of that here and there. But so what I would propose is that we set up a subcommittee. We give them a date of the October committee meeting, which is 8 weeks or so, something like that, and that they should be able to come back to us with some sort of draft final product. And all I need is 3 people to raise their hand, and we can get that done.
Steve, this is Helene. I'm raising my hand.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Helene.
Sheila,
yeah.
I'm raising my hand.
That's great. We need at least one more.
Come on, Nancy. Come join us. I'd love to have your thoughts because you put together this original application with Steve.
Okay.
Yay.
Good. That's great. We've got 3. Let's get her done. Do we have any other comments or discussions about the committee or subcommittee and member survey?
This is Carrie, can I say one thing? Can we just really keep it simple? Because I found it so confusing to try and deal with the formatting and so much that was being asked for. I really think something needs to be very simple. There's a lot of good stuff online about how to make good surveys or applications, and maybe it's something, Steve, you had mentioned possibly getting a consultant to help with that. Might be something to consider.
Yeah, I will. I'll leave that up to the committee to make that recommendation. And I think you could even sit in on a committee meeting, maybe if you wanted. But
that's going to be problematic because you've got 3 members, 4 would make a quorum. So unless you want to have an meeting, you don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, Carrie.
I will to the point that Carrie just, if I could, Mr. Chairman, we do have a subscription. My office has a subscription to SurveyMonkey, so if somebody wants to do have some survey questions, we could put it in that format and put it out to the committee or to a broader audience if you like.
One of the things, and I'll leave it to the subcommittee to think about, is that there are probably people within the town that you could talk to that could be helpful. Mark or people at TP&Z or Operation Hope, or they're just other people, and so you shouldn't be shy about reaching out to them, or even to some planners we have in town. We've got some good attorneys, some good architects, engineers. So if you think that there's something they can help you with, and don't be shy. And if you need a name, I'm happy to find a name for you. And yes, if you think that it might be helpful to get some paid professional help, then don't be shy about asking. I'm not going to say you're going to get it, but
you won't have that.
We'll look at it. I'm sorry, what was that, Mark?
I said you have to go through a procurement process. You won't have that in place in 8 weeks.
Yeah. Okay. Under advisement. Yeah.
We'll let you know. I think we'll check back. Hopefully we'll try to have a little information for you in September. Check the dates.
Chairman, was there a motion made to establish a subcommittee to provide a recommendation by October meeting with the membership to be Helene, Sheila, and Nancy? Did I hear a motion on that?
So moved.
I don't believe you did.
Okay, I was just making sure, because Joanne is voting in favor of it, so I just want to make sure that we're voting on this.
Yes, thank you for reminding me to do the proper thing. So we have a motion that Marcus, again, thankfully articulated for us. It's been moved by me, and if we get a second, we can go forward.
I don't know that I can second.
Carrie could second.
I could second.
Yeah.
All right.
So we got a second. Any further discussion? All in favor then? Say aye.
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 Gretchen, Joanna's voting in favor.
Okay.
She emailed me.
And all opposed? Nay? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Thank you, Sheila, Helene, and Nancy. And yes, still, as Sheila said, if you have something for September, great. You can do the Survey Monkey, or you can just, send us out stuff if you have questions that you need our input on. Okay, moving on.
Thank you.
And again, thank you. Moratorium status report. I think I sent out something, Mark, that you had put together in July. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
That's the last update, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. And so we're not there yet, but we're making progress. Is there anything more that you want to add regarding that, Mark?
Well, there's a couple. I'm sure. I don't know if you have it on your agenda elsewhere, but there are a couple applications currently pending before Planning and Zoning that are proposed set-aside developments under Connecticut General Statute 8-30G. There was a proposal for, and it's on the moratorium list, but there's a proposal for 528 Black Rock Turnpike, which is proposed set-aside development, 23 units, I believe, which is currently before the commission. Was continued. The hearing was continued until, I believe, next Tuesday, which is the continuation of that hearing. There was a prior application made for 131 Beach Road, 40-unit set-aside development, which the hearing was commenced and continued to September 15th. So those are two applications that are presently before the commission under 8-30G. We do have word that another one was recently submitted to Planning and Zoning for the former plant factory site. So that has not yet been calendared, but there are some applications that are pending. The other thing I will add with regard to the moratorium, there was discussion as it relates to whether or not we can incentivize people with accessory dwelling units to voluntarily deed restrict their property such that they would be counted. And there is a provision in the statutes that allows accessory dwelling units to be counted as affordable units, provided there's a 10-year deed restriction in place. I did have a conversation with Mike Santoro, and Department of Housing. Some of you may recall that this was the means by which the town of Trumbull secured their initial moratorium by counting accessory dwelling units to meet their moratorium obligations and meet the number of points needed for a temporary moratorium. That was a matter that was there was some controversy associated with the application. The Department of Housing initially rejected the application. It was appealed, and the appeal period, basically the town of Trumbull was granted a provisional moratorium. The issue was never fully decided by the AG's office or by Department of Housing on appeal, but Trumbull got the benefit of a provisional moratorium. The reason I mention this is that Department of Housing is of the opinion that while a 10-year deed restriction would qualify an ADU to count towards the 10%, would count as an affordable housing unit, it may not count towards moratorium points. I find that to be a head scratcher, but that would not be the first time that the state has a weird position on this. So I'm bringing it up because I have talked to the town attorney and to the first select woman about ways in which we might be able to leverage our affordable housing stock, our housing stock in general, and especially the accessory dwelling units that are currently in town, to meet at least our moratorium, to get some moratorium points out of that. But so that's the only wrinkle, fly in the ointment, shall we say. But the town attorney is looking into the issue.
Mark, this is Sheila. So I get that, Milford walked around and got all their mobile home units to sign, certifications to reach the moratorium. So that's what I would propose for Fairfield would be that we actually assisted owners to create legal accessory units with some HTF, so it shows that we've actually interacted and in a meaningful way, and that's the incentive as well. But we get the deed restriction out of it. It also makes them legal. It also goes on the assessor's books, doesn't it? Doesn't that increase revenue as well?
Well,
tax revenue?
Actually, all the units, we do have over 150 legal accessory dwelling units that are in compliance with their zoning regulations, and they are on the books, shall we say. So we do have, unlike Trumbull, we have a mechanism already in place that allows for the creation or establishment of accessory dwelling units. Trumbull didn't, so that's why there was Trumbull basically granted amnesty in exchange for a deed restriction so that they could qualify for moratorium. So here we were trying a different strategy, and I'm not suggesting that we don't try it. I'm just acknowledging that there is, as always in interactions with the State Department of Housing, some risk. And I think there is possibility to get some clarification from the statute legislatively. That's what Milford did with the mobile homes. That allowed them to count those units specifically. So I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't use housing trust fund monies or providing some other means by which we can incentivize people to create accessory dwelling units that are deed restricted and count towards our affordable housing obligation. It's just that, and they will count towards our affordable housing obligation overall. It is an open question, or at least a question unsettled by current law, at least from the Department of Housing, as to whether or not those units would count towards the moratorium.
Yeah,
so
I understand.
Point out.
If we were to incentivize people to take their apartments that are not currently legal and make them legal, that would be beneficial on multiple points whether we get a moratorium out of it or not. Is all I'm saying.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
Mark, I just wanted to make a couple of comments, which you had said earlier, just put things in context about the proposed developments. The 528 Black Rock Turnpike is down by the circle, right?
Yes, it is.
Kings Highway Circle.
It's a cleared lot right now.
Yeah, and it's a small, under, like a little over half an acre. And that's 23 units. Yeah.
Pretty dense.
I don't know if you mentioned 15 Uncle Road.
15 Uncle
right
Road.
Downtown.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a proposal that is before code review. It is not an 830G application. And it was reviewed by the code review committee. Had some comments. I'm not sure it's ready for prime time yet, but it would be subject to the inclusionary zoning provision under the regs.
Yep. All right. And the hearing on 131 Beach Road, or the vote, has that been taken? Did they vote on that?
The hearing was continued until September 15th, and the purpose was to allow the neighbors who have hired an attorney and some experts to do their own.
Yep. Okay. And just, I'm sorry to go back over the numbers. We've got like 340 points already, and we've got 200 and some in developments, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and we need is it 450?
433.
433. So we will be there pretty shortly, God willing.
We will. So. Not quick enough, I'm afraid.
Yeah. And can you just say a few words about, if we get the moratorium, that doesn't mean that all development will stop. There are still certain types of affordable housing that are permitted.
Yes,
correct?
That's correct. I don't have the statute in front of me, but assisted housing, which is governmentally assisted housing, such as what's the Housing Authority, for example, had proposed 980 High Street, which is 40 units. That would still be permitted even under a temporary moratorium. So the other aspect that people may not be totally aware of, as Westport is dealing with currently, even when you make an application for a moratorium, people can still file applications under 830G until that application has been approved. So it has to go all the way through the process, which is laborious and time-consuming to begin with. And during that period where it's still noticed and being reviewed, you're still subject to 830G applications. And those that were filed before the temporary moratorium was granted would still need to be properly adjudicated.
And that's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because sometimes, like when the building code changes, and this happened, I think, on Campfield, the developer will go in and pour a foundation or footings, and that preserves their spot in the line. And if the code changes after the footings are poured, they still have to adhere to the old code. And so I could see where somebody might rush to do an 830G application just to preserve their status, even if it was a maybe not totally polished application.
And it's already occurring to some degree, because people are mindful of the fact that we are approaching the points necessary to qualify to a moratorium application, and we have heard that from proposed from developers or applicants.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So moving on to, I don't know if it's old business or new business, but is there anything, Mark, that we can talk about regarding Operation Hope, the condominium, the four-family, maybe housing, any other of those kinds of ideas that we talked about previously?
Just briefly, well, I'll deal with the one that's fairly quick first. I don't have anything new to report with respect to Operation Hope. I do have hope that we can still perhaps salvage or at least further consider the proposed acquisition of four-family on Ardmore. I thought that made a lot of sense from an acquisition standpoint, assisted by Housing Trust Fund monies, to keep that as affordable, deed-restricted affordable housing. I think, obviously they would need to figure out other aspects of financing. It would be a lot easier if we were able to project-base some Section 8 vouchers there. That would be a mechanism by which they could secure some financing for the project, but that's not likely to happen. But I haven't talked to Carla directly in the last few weeks to see where they are in their thought process, but I will do that.
Mm-hmm.
The Navy housing site, I do anticipate that I will have a proposal for you to consider at our September meeting, or perhaps earlier if circumstances permit, to acquire or reacquire property there that's become available. The purpose of the acquisition would be to land bank it for future redevelopment. It is a key piece of property that would allow us to assemble the necessary lots to do a meaningful redevelopment. And the point of this would be to preserve existing affordable, deed-restricted affordable home ownership units, and to finally resolve the long-standing flood insurance issues for that site that really are undermining the affordable aspect of it, of that project. So I would anticipate that we'll have a proposal for you in the next several weeks, making an offer to the homeowner, subject to the approval of various town boards, including the Affordable Housing Committee, and utilization of monies from Housing Trust Fund to facilitate that.
And Mark, let me just interject that the trust fund is supposed to be used for affordable housing, and in real estate, sometimes you have to move very quickly, and so I would expect there will be special housing committee meetings called just to deal with a proposal for use of the trust fund dollars, because we have to review and approve and submit it on to the Board of Selectmen. And sometimes you've got to do that very quickly, and it cannot wait for our monthly meetings. That's all.
True. Thank
you. Yeah. Mark, nothing with Operation Hope in Durrell Drive?
Well, they did close on that piece of property. They were able to acquire it thanks to a state grant that allowed them to acquire that property. It was already deed restricted, but the owner had indicated that he wanted to move on. He wanted to sell the property. We wanted to keep it in good hands with somebody that would maintain units as affordable and do a good job of managing the property. So Operation Hope was willing to do that.
Mm-hmm. I know there was hopes that they might get another structure there.
There is
and be able to.
Right, there is that potential to perhaps add on or expand. What's currently there is two duplex units or four 2-bedroom units that are currently there. They have looked at it as the possibility of maybe adding a unit there, but nothing definitive.
Okay. Just a couple other comments from me. One is that 995 South Pine Creek Road. I still see that as we're not going anywhere, so cross that one off. But the two sites that came to our attention recently, 56 Shoreham Terrace and 173 Samp Mortar. I guess that guy is an owner-developer, and he wanted to put more units on small lots. I think Shoreham Terrace, we could maybe talk. I don't know. That's not a big lot. I don't know what he really has in mind. Samp Mortar, I just think the lot does not make itself available for even a good single-family home because it's such a steep walk up to the top, and so I wouldn't spend any time on that. But those are just my views. That's all I have. Does anybody have any other comments, questions, new business?
Go ahead, Sheila.
Yeah. Sorry. I was just curious if Steve and Mark have talked any more about incentive zoning on Kings Highway.
Can you clarify that a bit more? Kings Highway East, I'm assuming you're talking about?
Kings Highway East, yes. Yeah, right. Between Route 58, Tunxus Hill, where it ends, and Black Rock Turnpike, I suppose, but it could go all the way down to Home Depot. I don't know. You all brought it up at a meeting. I don't know. I want to say it was January. So I was just curious.
We haven't talked, although we just a few minutes ago talked about an 830G that was submitted that is really sort of right there on that little vacant land, now vacant land.
Yeah, but incentive zoning is a little bit different than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not from my side. I haven't discussed it. Mark, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Well, not specific to any particular neighborhood or area of town. I think there's been some conversation with planning and zoning staff, and I think they've talked to the commission about whether there needs to be some consideration, further amendment to our zoning regs to provide some alternative for developers in lieu of an 830G application. So that's kind of how we started the conversation. We have a floor which says, if you're creating 10 or more units, you have to put aside 10% of those as below market rate units. If you're in the TOD zone around the train station, we're looking more like 12.5% or something like that. That said, we're still seeing a proliferation of 830G applications, and the point has been made by some applicants that if there were some middle ground, perhaps that would provide for 15 or 20% affordability at or below 80%, with some modification to density that would allow these developments to occur to be economically feasible. Maybe that would be something we should look at. And that was, in fact, there was a provision in our zoning regs from a long time ago as relates to DRD overlay that allowed some of these condominium developments around town to be developed that are more, have a higher density per acre than what is currently permitted under our regs. So there is some conversation. It's not limited to a neighborhood, but it is looking at our DRD overlay regs and saying, maybe we've dialed that back so far that it's not economically feasible for anyone to actually use this provision. And what we're doing is basically telling people to make an 830G application instead. And wouldn't it be better if we had some reasonable alternative that would be a middle ground for people to take as an option? So I think, and that's kind of the whole thought process behind the state's incentive housing zone, which was, that was the planning money we got to do our affordable housing plan was under that guise. And so we did look at it. We thought it made sense to modify our regs, and 6 years later, I think the zoning commission is now saying, well, maybe we should take another look at this. So they are talking about it, but I think that's part of the POCD update.
Yeah,
it does allow. Idea.
It does allow for some design mechanisms, the DRD.
It does. And, I think they could be strengthened.
I do too. Yeah. And it does, do exactly what it does. It's an incentive to build in an area where the town decides they want to have affordable housing and market rate housing or a mix, and and tie it into transportation. The Kings Highway goes all the way to Post Road and then into Bridgeport. So it's a perfect combination of living residential area and neighborhood and not so much commercial, but what is that called? It's a particular transit oriented space. I can't remember the wording.
It's kind of a transitional space is what it would be.
Yeah, it's transitional. I would say a transitional zone for sure.
Yeah. And certainly with the changes in retail that we're seeing, and there's a lot of big empty or almost empty retail spaces there, that area is ripe for development as housing at 80% AMI, and it would be a different kettle of fish, I think, and particularly with a height limitation.
Yeah, you could really design it so that it's the cost isn't prohibited, but yet we are controlling the height to some extent and the design a little bit.
Mark, have you heard anything about the cinema, the movie theater in Fairfield that just closed at BJ's?
Yeah, we've looked at that. So I talked to the broker and to the theater operator, and as well as several prospective developers, and no one really sees that as a residential site. It is. It was it was a heavy manufacturing facility, and was adapted for the BJ's Wholesale Club and for the cinema. So I'm not saying it's impossible. It'd be very expensive, and people think that there's much better sites to do that type of work. So it could be probably some type of, it is zoned for that industrial type use, so it could be used for things not very sexy, but warehouse distribution type, or some type of entertainment. There's lots that kind of fall into our existing industrial zone uses, so, but probably not residential.
And Nutmeg Bowling, are they still around? Are they alive and well?
They are.
Yeah. Okay. Just another thought. Okay. Well, that's all I have on my thoughts. Sheila, anything more?
I was wondering if maybe next time Perry could give us an idea about the brochure that you all spoke about for the ADU to assist homeowners on that.
I don't think we'd finalize it until we knew what the commission was doing in terms of their schedule. But yes, I can certainly give you an idea.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Anybody else have any final thoughts? Okay, hearing none, I will call the meeting closed at 8:25. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a good remainder of August and a good Labor Day. And we'll talk again in September, if not before.
If not before.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.